Well, we have an interesting program tonight. We know we have Stroszek. We don't have Woyzeck, but we do have Werner Herzog, and I would like to introduce him, and he will introduce the evening's program for you. Please welcome Werner Herzog.
In fact, we do not really have a program. We do have the film Stroszek, and I just was shown the film Woyzeck, and it looks as if an elephant had trampled on a spool. So we can't show that one, but I hope that a friend of mine, who is one of the producers of Rescue Dawn, is going to bring a 35mm print. He's here in town, and I think he will make it here by 9 o'clock. If worst comes to worst, I can show a DVD, which I hate to do in a theater like this, of The Wild Blue Yonder, a film that I like a lot. Otherwise, I could only sing to you instead. Stroszek is very dear to my heart. And I just very recently met Bruno S., who still lives in Berlin. He is a pensioner, has worked as a forklift driver in a steel factory. And he is arguably the best, most intense and most moving actor with whom I have ever worked. So I'm very proud of his achievement. Difficult to work with him because he is very, very suspicious about any person that is not living very nearby or was not a colleague at the workplace, and even there he was some sort of a marginal figure. His mother was a prostitute who didn't want this child and kept beating him so severely. When he was 3 years old, he lost speech, and she got rid of him, put him into an asylum for insane children and retarded children, but of course he was not retarded at all. And he spent the next 23 years institutionalized, at the end in some short-term prison terms for vagabondry or public drunkenness. Or he would break into a car in winter when it was freezing cold and slept in a Mercedes, and at 6 in the morning police would arrest him for breaking into a car, and he spent 2 or 3 months in jail for that. So and then abruptly he was released and was never back in any institution again. And he of course has something radical about him, which you can see in the film. And in one instance, and I shot it only once, he speaks to the young woman in the film when they're in America about his time when he was in a juvenile detention center, and he would wet his bed, and the overseers and the wardens would force him to hold his bed sheet in front of all the other kids until it was dry, and he was not allowed to lower his arms until the bed sheet was dry. So that was all very, very severe sort of punishment for him, and he actually tells this story, and it was filmed only one single time. And I wouldn't repeat a scene like this. Many of the scenes are completely invented on the spot. For example, it was hunting season in Wisconsin, extremely cold, by the way, hunting season, and I still had about an hour and a half of daylight left, and I stopped 2 hunters and I said, could you please be in a scene? We are film students here from Germany. And they said, yeah, okay, it's okay. And I told them if they didn't understand anything anymore, and if it was boring for them, just jump into the car and just drive to the next curve. So I shot it once. It was just in real time what we shot. I only moved the camera quickly to another position that was done in 10 seconds and repeated it, and they drove off, and I never saw them again. I don't know their names. They can't be in the credits. They are still not in the credits. So it's a film which was shot in a place, Wisconsin, which I liked a lot, but we can talk about it later in the intermission between the two films. So please enjoy Stroszek, and whatever comes after that remains to be seen.
Won't you welcome the author of Stroszek, Werner Herzog.
First of all, I would like to apologize. It was a video, beta SP or whatever, but it looks like a third or fifth generation VHS. copied. The film actually looks much better, and I just saw Nick Rasland, one of the producers of Rescue Dawn, and he brought in a real fine 35mm print celluloid of Rescue Dawn. So he saved the evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, one thing that occurred to me before the evening's program changed, because it's almost a kind of programmer's dream to have Stroszek on a double bill with Woyzeck, and I wondered if they were in some ways a companionate pair in your imagination, because they both sort of deal with a man who's defenseless, and it seemed like one was a preparation for making the other, or not?
Yeah, well, you probably might know from commentaries on the DVD that I had the plan to do Woyzeck with Bruno. And then I really had the feeling that was a wrong casting. And actually, I think I have never really made a major mistake in casting in my whole life. When I look back at my films, they're always very well cast, and I knew abruptly one morning waking up this would be a monumental mistake. So, and I had the feeling Kinski should be it, and I called Bruno, and they got him on the phone in the factory in Berlin, and I said to him, Bruno, we are heading for doing this together, but I think this would be a mistake and somebody else has to play the part. So he was kind of upset, long silence on the phone. He normally would answer right back, so there was long, ominous silence. And he just asked, I think that he had taken his unpaid vacations in addition to his vacations for some time during winter. And so it was so painful and so awful what I had to do, that I said to him, Bruno, let's keep your time, keep it as it is, and we'll do another film. So Bruno says, yeah, what is it going to be? I said, I don't know. But I will send you a screenplay. I will write a screenplay until the end of the week, and I'll send it to you. So out of complete and utter embarrassment, I sat down for 4 days and wrote Stroszek and sent it to him, and we did that film then instead, and I think it was a wise decision. And just to give him some sort of consolation, I said, the title will sound almost like Woyzeck. I will call the film Stroszek. and Stroszek just came to mind because it is a name it's an odd Polish-sounding name, which is very uncommon in German. It sounds like something foreign and strange. And the leading character in the film Signs of Life, my first long feature film, has the name Stroszek in the film. And it came because I fraudulently somehow studied a few semesters at Munich University, hardly ever showed up in the buildings, never attended classes, but one day I had to deliver a paper and I had no idea about what subject it was. But there was one man who was very good and very smart, and I said to him, "Can you write this for me?" And he said, "What's in it for me?" And I said, "Well, I'm going to make a film and I will name the leading character after you." His name was Hauke Stroszek. And he said, "Yeah, well, what do you mean by that?" And I said, "I will make your name immortal." He kind of grinned, and in a way he was nice and wrote the paper for me. And I had the feeling it wasn't enough, and I should name a whole film Stroszek. And it's very funny because only 3 weeks ago I was in Berlin at the film festival, and I was in the jury, and there was also a film shown, by the way, Signs of Life, in a retrospective of films that had won at this festival. And a young lady approaches me and she says Stroszek to me. And I said, "No, we are not showing Stroszek, we are showing Signs of Life." And she bowed and she said Stroszek and pointed at herself. And I said, "What do you mean by that?" And she said, "My name is Linda Stroszek. Does this name sound familiar to you?" And I said, "Of course it does." And she said, "My father is the one for whom you wrote this, whom you named in the screenplay. He's meanwhile," and I had lost him out of sight for 40 years or so. He's professor at University of Aachen for literature. So it's all of a sudden a circle closed. And we made the film Stroszek in Wisconsin, and what you see at the end is Cherokee, North Carolina, a place which I really like a lot.
I know that you came over as a young man to the United States and hitchhiked around, and was that in your mind, just because you were sort of navigating without a map, or you had a short script, but did you know what to expect, or what were you going to try and find when you got over to Wisconsin? What things were you looking for to present?
No, Wisconsin, I actually never hitchhiked in the United States. I had an old Volkswagen Beetle which was rusted through at the bottom, and when it was raining, rainwater splashed into it from the underside. No, Wisconsin was a place I discovered I discovered it through Errol Morris, who is in the credits because he had been after stories of mass murderers in Plainfield, Wisconsin, which is a town 480 people in the middle of nowhere, basically an intersection of two roads, and there's a gas station and a few stores and a few buildings, and then farmhouses out around. And he went there because it's a place where 5 people within very short period of time became mass murderers. Among them, the most notorious Ed Gein, who recently died in Warsaw Federal Prison. He was a role model. Ed Gein was a role model for Hitchcock's Psycho.
Yes.
And I went to Plainfield, Wisconsin for a very simple reason. Errol had found out that Ed Gein, he had murdered people, not too many. This wasn't really mass murder, but he had also dug up freshly buried corpses from the cemetery. And Errol found out that these corpses that he excavated formed an almost perfect circle. In the very center was the grave of Ed Gein's mother. So he pondered over the question, and we discussed it quite often. Did he also exhume his own mother, because he made throne seats out of the flesh of people and lampshades and all sorts of crazy things. And I said we can answer it only by going there at night, and if we dig together and if we find out that the grave is empty, Ed Gein must have been there before us. If his mother is still in the coffin, then he hasn't touched the grave. So I came to Wisconsin to Plainfield. I was shooting in Alaska and I made it all the way down via Canada, and so he didn't show up. He just had chickened out, and I had bought a shovel and things like that, digging materials, and he was just cowardly and didn't show up. So in my car it was half broken down, and people told me, oh yeah, there's a wreckage yard a little bit outside. And I went there and had my car fixed, and I hung around for a day, and I liked these people a lot. And a year and a half later or so, I made a film with them included. There are the real mechanics there.
Oh, wow. And is he really yanking out his own tooth in that?
No, it's not his own tooth. It's fake.
But he's done it.
No, he has never done it. But I saw that. I have to confess, I saw this in a film by Les Blanc. I think it's Spend It All, a wonderful film about Cajun people, and one of the Cajuns pulls out his own tooth and rants and goes wild, and I asked Les, can I steal this scene from you? And he said, yeah, of course you can. But he was a man who would have done it. Mm-hmm. He looked like somebody who would have done it. But he was really wonderful, and this young Native American assistant, he didn't know when I came back a year and a half later. He didn't know who he was. He said, I never had a Native Indian assistant. In fact, I never ever had an assistant. But I insisted, and I said, yes, I have seen him and I remember him, and he was chubby. So finally he remembered, yes, he had hired that young man that very morning and fired him at night. And he had forgotten completely, and it took a long time until we tracked him down. And another person whom I tracked down was the young man who plays the banker. I took him from a film I made on the World Championship of Livestock Auctioneers. And he, as a student of economics, had earned some money by being the Toastmaster. And he was so good, and I tracked him down and asked him to act in the film, and so he joined the team. Oh. So that was the way we put things together. And by the way, the auctioneer, who is wonderful, Colonel Ralph Wade, he is a former world champion livestock auctioneer. Wonderful. He's really, really good. And I always had the feeling that these auctioneers are the ultimate and definitive poetry of capitalism. So there's a great beauty in it. I have always dreamt of staging Shakespeare's Hamlet, all with livestock auctioneer world champions, and bring the performance down under 14 minutes. I think it would be wonderful. Just imagine having Shakespeare recited at that kind of speed and with this rhythm and with this poetry in their voices. So, because we know the text anyway, and we know pretty much what's happening in the play.
Like opera, it'd be great. Let's open the floor to some questions. Starting with you, sir, and then we'll move back around.
Can you be louder a little?
So you filmed everything with the mechanic and assistant in one day?
He was asking for clarification. Did you film everything with the mechanic and his assistant in one day?
No, I was not clear. When I was hung around in Plainfield, Wisconsin, and I had my car fixed, I hung around for one day at this wreckage yard, and they repaired my car, and I saw this young Native American young man. Later, when we filmed, he was around for at least 10 days or so.
How long did it take you to film altogether?
I think there was something like 4.5 weeks in America. We shot America first, and then Berlin, the first part. I do not remember, for very practical reasons. We didn't have access to the prison, and we couldn't, a few other things, and some of the actors who are in the film, like the two pimps, were not available. One was briefly in jail, the one with the fur coat and the hat. He was a very, very dangerous man, world-class light heavyweight boxer. And he had a huge rap sheet as a pimp and as a drug dealer and for violence. He was a very, very violent man. And the other young man, this very big guy, Burkhard, his name is actually Burkhard Driest, who is a writer and also a filmmaker and has acted in films. But he had an interesting career. He was a law student. And a week before his final exams, he robbed a bank and got away with the loot and hid it under the bed of his girlfriend. And then 2 weeks later, he had a fight with his girlfriend and she gave him in. And he was put on trial and got 5 years in prison, and he spent 3.5 years in prison and then was released on probation. But while he was in prison, he became a writer. And a very, very fascinating man, but both of them quite dangerous. And you never knew, could I continue next day shooting with them, because one of them might be arrested again. And the one who was prone to be arrested was the boxer.
Your question. Were the rabbit and the chicken novelties written into the script, or did you find those?
Well, I had seen them more than a decade before when I passed through Cherokee, North Carolina, and it was very strange because I had fallen very ill at the border of Mexico and Guatemala and rushed back to Pittsburgh, where I had a family that took care of me. And I was really having a bad fever, and I passed through Cherokee, North Carolina in the middle of the night, and about an hour later I'm back in Cherokee, North Carolina, and I consulted the map, and it was very clear, you have to go north and you can take only that one route, and I was really cautious not to miss the signs. And I drove on, and at 4 o'clock in the morning I was a third time in Cherokee, North Carolina. So that really stuck to me, and I spent the rest of the night in the car, and I said I have to wait for day. And then I saw that there were dancing chicken in this. And I went back 10 years later to these people, but they were in winter quarters at that time, and I kept them in special training so that they would dance longer than only 5 seconds or so, which I normally would do. So many things that are in the film, like the dancing chicken or Wisconsin or so, are very physical, personal experiences of mine. And it's in a way a reflection of America. It's kind of a dark reflection. I have my image of America has much more brightened meanwhile, and I do live in America, and I really like your country. So it has changed. Yeah.
It would seem that that's kind of stuff you can't make up. I mean, you know what I mean. In other words, it's too interesting, and it would seem a lot like other things that you've photographed and caught in your films that might not exist anymore. It can only exist in the film, or.
Yes, but it's like with many of my films, they come from life itself. It's not that I'm a screenwriter who somehow starts to invent a story and develops storylines and develops characters and things like that. It has never ever occurred to me. That's why I write so fast, because it's and in literature you have similar figures. I do not want to compare myself with them, but I just say, when you read Joseph Conrad, you immediately know, yes, he has been in the Congo, and he has been on a steamship up the river, and he has encountered strange, isolated figures in colonial times, or he has been in East Asia. You can tell, or with Hemingway, you can always tell he must have seen a lot of what he describes. So in a way, the films that I make very, very often come from pure life, from living the life.
Mm-hmm. Question right in the center there, you sir, yes.
Yes, thank you.
Oh.
The people who played the characters of Eva and the old man, were they professional actors, and how did you get in touch with them?
Eva and the elderly man, were they professional actors?
Yeah. Eva is one of the greatest German actresses in theater and in movies. She was in quite a few films by Fassbinder before she worked with me. Scheitz I found in a box full of cards for extras. And I went very quickly through the cards of extras for Kaspar Hauser. I needed an extra. And I stopped at Scheitz, at Clemens Scheitz. That's his real name. And people at this agency told me, no, please, not that one. And I said, why not? And they said he's slightly gaga. He has these theories about animal magnetism. And he will try to convince you that the moon landing of American astronauts can only be fraud, and he proves it on a napkin very quickly by multiplying some figures in the square root of something, and he says, this is the proof, because the Earth and the moon the moon is not circling around the Earth, the moon in fact goes in waves and has an interference with the Earth, and you cannot land on the moon because you will always caught in some interferences. And he proves it very quickly. And I liked him so much when I had him only for one day as an extra in Kaspar Hauser that I asked him, please stay, and I'm going to write more for you into the screenplay. And I even wrote the end of the film for Herr Scheitz, where he hands over his top hat to a coach and lets his hat go home, and he walks after the coach. So and he is somebody who has been on my mind all the time, and I had the feeling he had to be in this film. And I would like to add one thing. I do not make a distinction between professional and non-professional actors. Professional is the actor who is good on screen. So, and that includes Kinski or Nicolas Cage, or you just name them, yeah.
The gentleman in the black shirt there, short sleeve shirt.
You had the abandoned circling truck, and even Dwarf started small as well. Is that a symbol of chaos? Or?
The abandoned circling truck, is it a symbol of chaos? You've had it in other films.
Not really, because I don't think in symbols, in terms. It's foreign for me. You see, I worked at the Oktoberfest when I was 17, and for a fortnight, the Oktoberfest in Munich is this gigantic beer festival where you have huge tents with a capacity of 10,000-12,000 people, and they all get drunk. And it's the biggest amusement event in the world, probably. And I worked as an attendant at the parking lot. And each night I had to deal with 3,000 people who were drunk. I mean, drivers who were drunk. And some of them so drunk that I better confiscated the key. How to do that was sometimes really rough, because some of them would be aggressive, but some were so drunk that they just fell out of the car, and I laid them on the ground, and later I handed them over to an ambulance. And I was always left with about 10, 15, 20 cars and the keys. So in the parking lot, the gigantic parking lot was completely empty, so just for spending the next hours in a nice way, I drove the car and drove in circles, and then one day I had the feeling I should step out of it and let the car drive on. So I each night I had some cars circling, so it's not a symbol. I did it myself.
The question about symbolism brings up a question I had just getting to know your work over the years. You know, your aesthetic. I wouldn't, it's not like a voice, but it's just like the way you look at things is so particular, and it resists the pressure of the usual kinds of filmmaking vocabulary. I'm wondering, were you ever consciously in rebellion against movies as they stood, or were you just simply going for what you needed to do?
No rebellion, because I had not seen many films in my life, and until today I normally do not see more than, let's say, 3 films a year, sometimes only 2 films a year. So I don't care what the others are doing, and most of the time I have the feeling I do it better anyway. Can I say? However, I spent 10 days at the Berlin Film Festival, and as a jury, being in the jury, I had to watch the 20 films that were in competition. I had to see them all, and that was probably more than in 5, 6, 7, 8 years together. And I didn't see films until very late. I didn't even know that cinema existed until I was 11. So
what provoked the ambition to become a filmmaker?
I don't know. It was irrevocably there, and I accepted it after some hesitation, because I knew it would be a complicated life, and the things that I wanted to do would never find producers, would never find alliances. So in many of the films like this one, I had to produce myself. And even Fitzgeraldo I had to do myself. It was a project that 20th Century Fox was interested in, but very quickly I saw I had to be alone with it, because I wanted to do a plastic little boat over the Botanic Garden Hill in San Diego. So that was obvious. The industry is functioning different than I do. And because of that, I have been, in a way, solitary, but I've never made a big deal out of that. I just do what I really like to do, and I struggle to do it, and I try to stay alive as a filmmaker, because normally, as a filmmaker, you don't have much more than, let's say, 15 years as an average for a good filmmaker. Mm-hmm. Normally not more than 15 years. Very few exceptions.
Is it about physical fitness? I mean, what is
No, I don't think so. It has. I don't know what it is, but when you look at Buñuel, who made films in the mid-30s, surrealistic films, and then he made films in Spain and in Mexico, and then late in his life he made films in France, and he always was after new horizons. And he lasted very, very long in his filmmaking. Yes. And I really admire men like that, women. Leni Riefenstahl had this longevity, but not only as a filmmaker, as a photographer and as a deep sea diver and whatever. So, but normally it doesn't happen that you survive long.
Is that because I don't want to say the system, but just the way that a lot of filmmakers come up in a means that they're comfortable with, so they don't look for new horizons? Do you feel it's the new horizons aspect that keeps you young?
I don't know what it is, but it destroys men, and it destroys the strongest. When you look at Orson Welles, for example, and a man as strong as an animal, like a bison, and he makes a few films and then eats too much, drinks too much, is too many times at parties, and is a breakfast master in dubious circles. So it's very sad how these things happen. And or when you look at some of the most wonderful of them, David Wark Griffith, he spent the last 30 or 35 years of his life as a land surveyor, and he made the most successful films in the probably first half of century of filmmaking. Yeah. Very, very strange.
The hand that just went up, and then I'll get to yours. Yes.
Have you gotten a chance to see a copy of Harmony Korina's Trash Humpers? And if so, what was your review?
The question is about Harmony Korine's Trash Humpers, and if you've seen it, and what is your review?
No, Trash Humpers I have not seen, but I have seen two films, Gummo, which I really loved, and of course I have seen three films. I acted in Julian Donkey Boy, and I acted in Mr. Lonely. So I know three of his films, but the new film I haven't seen yet.
Your question.
Two parts. One is, why don't you watch more than 3 films a year? And my second question, I saw the films last night, and I was just, blown away by Cobra Verde, and I'm just interested in how your filmmaking has changed. I mean, people aren't making films today with 1,000 extras, and this film also, the pace of it is so different than what you see today. And how has your filmmaking changed in terms of making different films?
All right. Just for everybody, I'm going to repeat the two questions. One, the first question is simply just to expand on why don't you see more than, say, 3 films a year? Why don't you?
I'd like to answer that first. I don't really know. I spend most of my time making them, or whatever, but I feel more comfortable reading books than watching movies. Very hard to answer it. It's just a habit that I don't watch films.
The second question had to do with, it was directed a little bit about Cobra Verde and celebration of it, but wondering how you see your own evolution as a filmmaker, and also just the way movies are changing, that people don't make films on the same scale these days or with thousands of extras.
There's a large scale with 1,000 extra, and then this very small scale. And this actually reminds me of the film Ballast, which is also a very slow documentary-esque film. But if people aren't making either of those films very much.
Large scale, small scale, but something to do with the pace and just how you work.
Well, pace, that's something which has no clear rules. For example, Japanese films, very often, or Japanese films of the 50s or 60s, very often have a much slower and a different pace. I think it has to do with a sense of rhythm, and it has to do with a cultural background as well. And there's no consensus about pace or speed of a film. And the second, it is very, very hard to answer, because, for example, a film like Bad Lieutenant has a almost furious pace in comparison to this one that you just saw. Or, for example, Rescue Dawn, which you're going to see right after this discussion, has a much more intense pace. But sometimes I take time out and I play out certain images in a length that is completely unusual. And all of a sudden, like, for example, the dancing chicken, you don't get over with these dancing chicken as a director in 10, 15 seconds. It has to be hammered in, and nobody who has ever seen the dancing chicken ever forgets him. You may forget the whole story, but you will not. I guarantee you will not forget the dancing chicken. And it's completely out of rhythm and completely out of conventions. And I don't care who made these conventions. I don't care. I do it the way I see the film, and that's it. But by the way, I do not make the films for myself. I always make them for audiences. And I try to think with the thoughts and feel with the hearts of audiences. Can I give it to you?
I was wondering if you had a preference over making documentaries versus fictional films, and there's a major blur with a lot of your stuff, like Land of Silence and Darkness, that is so beautiful as a documentary that it seems like it was scripted, but I know it wasn't.
Well, the question about documentaries or feature films, I just do them as they come along. Tomorrow I will go to France and start shooting a film which is actually more in the direction of a documentary. But I have a big story which I would like to do in the Mideast. And there's a couple of stories that are pushing me, but there are some more imminent than the others. And I don't worry about it because you have writers who do, for example, dramas for the stage, and then next day they write a novel, and then they write poems. So I don't have a program, I don't have an ideology behind this. And besides, of course, much of the documentaries is staged anyway and invented.
I wonder, when people ask about pace, if there isn't maybe a better word for what everybody's reaching for that does sort of have an analogy in literature, which is concentration. You know what I mean? It seems that because you concentrate as much on the dancing chicken, or you concentrate on other elements, and in Badly Intended, you concentrate on them just simply rapidly. Does that make sense, just as a mental process that you're trying to register on film?
It doesn't answer it fully.
Okay.
It's something very mysterious, and I really have to think about it in order to give you an adequate answer. Tonight I don't have it, but I know it plays a very, very important part in what I'm doing. Mm-hmm. The pacing, the flow, the inner rhythm. It's not just the narrative sort of accentuations, it's an inner flow, and the inner flow is how an audience perceives it. And that's a highly, highly, highly complicated matter.
With respect to just, tonight we were seeing a little bit on video, too. We've got Celluloid coming up with Rescue Dawn. I'm wondering, do you feel it's promising at all for you as a filmmaker to work in HD and the sort of formats that are becoming available?
Yes, I have done it, Encounters at the End of the World, for practical reasons, because working in celluloid when it's extremely cold is almost prohibitive. So that was one reason, and I did My Son, What Have You Done, my last film, in 4K digital. I'm still a man of celluloid. I like to work with celluloid. But there's no ideology behind it. It simply allows you to work more inexpensively, and you can work faster. That's the only reason. But otherwise, for example, on the set, I would not allow video playout. I don't allow video village. It's a fake sort of security that you would have, and it distracts too many people onto a screen instead of looking at the actors. So, but as long as I can, as I can shoot on celluloid, I would shoot on celluloid.
Your question, sir. Yes.
I wanted to ask, this may fall under the heading of your comments on symbolism, but I was just curious, when they arrive in America, they seem to perceive it as this very idyllic place, and then the man they're staying with is talking about these murders. I was just curious, was that sort of a harbinger of all these bad things that have been happening, or does it just have some other kind of
The question's about the way things change. They come to America, it's idyllic, and then they talk about the murders, changes the direction of the movie, and he's asking about what that meant to you in terms of your planning of it.
Well, I had ended up in Plainfield, Wisconsin, and it was not my idea. It was Errol Morris, who had been into mass murder cases. But I had seen that, in particular, when you're in these areas, too many people are armed, and there is when you are out there, some sort of a looming menace out there. And in our case, the two farmers on the two bulldozers do not shoot at each other, but there's some sort of a threat out there over a disputed strip of land. Yeah, it's not the evil things or so. It's just that they arrive in a country that, in their opinion, was New York and Florida and the grizzly bears and things like that. Probably Las Vegas, and America, of course, is different. But it's not in order to show you particularly dangerous America. It's strange that some of the subjects, some of the themes filmed in 1976 today have an even stronger reverberation, like a mobile home or a property that has to be repossessed by the bank. That was 30 years or more than 30 years before the subprime mortgage crisis came over the country. Or other things like possession of guns, which has its strange and funny side as well, when Herscheid grabs a huge rifle and stages a bank robbery, which fails because the bank is closed. So it has its funny side as well.
There's the gentleman with the cap and the beige jacket there. Yes, you.
This is going back, I guess, to pacing, but I was curious about what your approach is to using music in films, because it seems to be pretty spare, especially in Stroszek. But I remember seeing about Grizzly Man that you had Richard Thompson and other wonderful musicians really improvise along with the score. I mean, do you have an approach to music or your own favorites, or what do you do?
Yeah, music.
Set approach to music.
Yeah, there's no clear school of thinking there. It's just that I love to listen to music, and I immediately know this is something which will one day fit into a movie. And here, with a dancing chicken, Solitary, Old Lost John, is a piece of music which you find recycled in The Bad Lieutenant. All of a sudden, the same piece of music comes up again. And it comes at the craziest moment in the film, where there's a shootout and Nicolas Cage says to one of the bad guys, to the drug dealer, shoot him again. And he says, what for? And he says, his soul is still dancing. So there's another shot, and you see a break dancer in the same gaudy pink jacket next to the gangster on the floor. And that's where the music, this same music, comes up again. It has not happened often, but sometimes it's unavoidable that this music has to be used once more. Grizzly Man, yes, a lot of the music was done with great musicians who saw much of the footage. But we never played it on the screen, they never played for a screen, they just started to develop the music out of what they had seen and had remembered in their hearts. So, normally it goes very fast. The editor Joe Beanie, who is here in the audience, can testify to that. Normally when I do a new film, I come with a couple of CDs, like Encounters at the End of the World. I brought Russian Orthodox church choirs, and I knew that was certainly going to end up in the film somehow. And we fed something like 15 or 20 titles into the Avid system, and then I took quick notes. There was a very slow, very melodious piece, and I knew that would be very good for the end of the film, for example, or whatever. So it goes fairly quickly.
Along the aisle, there was a lady in a blue scarf that had a question. Did you? Yes. Yeah. Okay, yours, sir.
In the past, you've written and produced most of your films, and now with things like Bad Lieutenant, you started doing films that you're just directing. And I wonder how you become involved with that, and if it's as personal.
The question is about your past, doing your own productions. Now you take assignments. How is that changing you, or what is changing?
Yeah, screenplay. In case of Bad Lieutenant, there was a screenplay by William Finkelstein, but I immediately started to work on the screenplay, and I changed about 30% or so. Made it in such a way that I could live better with it, and Billy Finkelstein had no problem with that. My Son, What Have You Done? I wrote myself. Actually, there was a second writer with me, Herb Golder, who had made me familiar with his bizarre murder case. For future projects that I have, I will write the screenplays myself. So there are very, very few exceptions where I didn't write the screenplay. But it doesn't really matter. There was a gentleman all the way back in black. Yes, we neglected the back here.
Sorry,
yes. No, there was a gentleman all the way back. Can you? Yes, please.
Could you describe your relationship with David Lynch? Do you like his work?
Yes, sure. I'm a great admirer of his work. He's one of the best that America has ever had. And I like him personally, although we have such different styles of life. He's in meditation, I'm not. I try to be in thinking and coming up with a coherent argument. He's more into meditation. So we are very, very different from each other. In My Son, What Have You Done? He presents the film and he has a credit as executive producer, but he was just from some distance looking at the company, at the production company, which was started by a collaborator of David Lynch who had worked with him for 10 years, Eric Bassett, and he had started his own production company. But in the presence of David Lynch at his breakfast table, we spoke about mushrooming budgets that went completely out of proportion. And I said to him, we should make films almost like a manifesto, where we would have a very limited budget, so that we would make films profitable quickly. And we should try to work with the best of actors and have a great story. Those were the ingredients. And he said, wonderful, yes, that's what we should do. And he said, do you have a project? I said, yes. And when can you start? I said, in principle tomorrow, but of course we started then later because Bad Lieutenant came in between and we postponed shooting of My Son. But we didn't have any direct influence in the film, but he was some sort of the moment where he illuminated an idea and brought it, because of his enthusiasm, we really started to go practically in raising the finances and finding the actors. So, but that's basically what I can say about it.
There was another gentleman in black who had a question that started to speak. Could you continue your question? What would you be doing if you weren't making films?
I don't know. I mean, excluding also acting or staging operas. I think I'm a better writer than filmmaker. If you see a book like Conquest of the Useless, you will certainly immediately know that my prose is better than my films. So I could be that maybe, but I've missed the boat when I was very, very young. Mathematician maybe, but into very creative forms of mathematics like topology. I've always been fascinated by quests in mathematics. But you have to have all the knowledge. You have to be up to date with the outer limits of mathematical knowledge by the age of 14, 15. Because nobody is a great mathematician, I mean a great innovative, creative mathematician beyond the age of 24. All great achievements, all great breakthroughs in mathematics were done by young men, adolescents, mostly 14, 15, and hardly ever beyond 24. So I missed that boat completely.
but our last question should be just about Rescue Dawn. I'd love to just for you to introduce it, and then we'll take a short break after that.
Okay, Rescue Dawn is a film very close to my heart, and it's originated with a man whose travails and tribulations we are describing in the film Dieter Dengler. Unfortunately, he died. I made a documentary with him because at the time the money for a documentary was there easier available, which is called Little Dieter Needs to Fly. Yeah, it's probably one of my strongest documentaries. But there was always the idea to do a feature film, and in the feature film was always first. And it somehow came together finally after quite a few years of no one wanting to go into finances, and all of a sudden a production company started to get into it. The production itself was unfortunate because there were unexperienced people, and some of it was a criminal scam, but I delivered a fine film anyway. So I'm proud for that. And the only one who was really, really dependable and saved the film in post-production then at the end was Nick Raslin, who brought the print. He's here with us. Is he Nick?
Thank you, Nick Raslin.
Somehow hiding back to us. So we are planning some more work together, and the film has been misunderstood as a film about the Vietnam War, which it is not. The war doesn't really factor in the film. Dieter Dengler never wanted to go to war, he just wanted to fly. He was absolutely fanatical about flying from a childhood experience when his small town was bombed to ashes, and he saw a diving bomber coming right at him, and he saw it. He was not afraid. For him it was like a supernatural being with incredible powers, and he wanted to be a pilot. He wanted to fly. And only a fortnight after he had his wings and he finally made it through the American Navy, he was put on an aircraft carrier and sent to Vietnam. But that was back in 1965, when nobody really took the war seriously. It wasn't really a war, it was a few Americans assisting some South Vietnamese generals to ward off a few insurgents in the north. So that was basically it, and only 40 minutes into his first mission, he was shot down. So the war, he never wanted to go to war, and when he went to war, it lasted 40 minutes, and that was that. And all of a sudden he finds himself on the ground in the POW, and he was, by the way, the only American POW who managed to escape North Vietnamese or Laotian captivity, and he was one of 3 or 4 American POWs who never signed a propaganda letter that the North Vietnamese, enforced upon all the prisoners, a propaganda letter denouncing the United States. And Dieter said, I love this country, I immigrated into America, America gave me wings, and he stayed loyal. And I think with him there were only 2 or 3 others. And including war heroes like McCain, the presidential candidate. He was in North Vietnamese captivity, and he was one of those who also signed the letter denouncing America. But I do not want to make a judgment, because conditions were so inhuman and so incredible that probably anyone would or should even sign it. But there were very few exceptions, which I do not want to put on a different moralistic level or ethical level. It wouldn't make sense. I just want to point out Dieter Dengler, as a German kid emigrating into the United States, never signed this letter. And he was very casual about it. He never made a big fuss about it. Or my wife, for example, asked him about because he was severely tortured, not all of this shown in the film, and my wife asked him, Dieter, when you think back about this whole ordeal, and so do you sleep well? Do you have nightmares at night? And he said, "Oh, honey, that was a fun part of my life." So, okay.
Thank you for giving us
Yes,
experience. Thank you for
yeah.
being here with us. Thank you for the wonderful question, everybody.